In week four's module, there's some information that explains how to go ahead and start processing the actual research paper itself. The document that you're going to put together is going to help incorporate the 5 sources that help support the thesis statement that you developed. This information is going to be blended together into a paper that actually is written by you that helps support the thesis. Now, I asked specifically that you're going to set the title up in a certain way, and of course I've given you the information here on how to actually write your titles, and I've given you some samples of titles that you'll see to where each one of the ones has a topic and then a specific focus area that you're going to focus on whenever you're writing your titles. Each one of the titles that you have here does have the colon. Your research paper's title is going to be set up in this same exact format. There will have to be a colon. None of these titles are sentences. They all deal with topics. The topic that was chosen: organ shortage, compensating organ donations, renewable energy, wind energy, teachers union, social security. Each one of them has the topic and then a specific focus area. Notice here that the first word and all important words in the title are capitalized. Words such as an, the, of, in, prepositions, and so forth are normally not capitalized unless they are the first word after a colon. So follow the directions very carefully for setting up the titles when it comes time to actually create the title for your paper. I want us to look at the sample research paper that is included in this particular module to kind of see the way that it's set up, because this is going to be the way that we will set up our paper. You'll be able to see as you scroll through the modules that when the final paper is due in week 6, the final paper is going to need to be 1,500 to 1,600 words in length, and that is introduction through conclusion. And then your works cited, of course, is going to be alphabetized correctly. But there's going to be multiple parts to this paper that you actually have to include all as one file when you upload it. The first page is going to be the title page, and you'll notice here that Michael Jackson set up his title page using the title in the format that I gave to you just a while ago, that it had the topic, a colon, and then the main point of what the paper is going to focus on. He has centered his name, and then it has my name, the name of the course, and then the date the paper is going to be due. Notice that this title here matches the title that is actually at the top of the paper. Those two things have to match exactly whenever you go to put your paper together. The second page is going to be the outline page, and of course at the top of the outline page you'll notice that there is a header. There is no header at the top of the title page. It has nothing at the top. At the top of the outline page is going to be your last name and then 2 little lowercase i's to show that this is the second page of the front part of the paper. The word outline is centered, and then of course the thesis statement that you submitted that was approved early on in the trimester is going to be the thesis statement that you will include here. This person had 7 Roman numerals. You're going to at least have to have 5 Roman numerals. The first one and the last one will be introduction and conclusion, and then you get to decide what it is that goes here in the middle. Notice that the first letter of each one of the points is capitalized, but you only capitalize the first letter and any proper nouns such as United States and Internet. Everything else is lowercase. And this person had 2 points that had an A and a B. I would like for you to at least have, of the topics that you have in the center, at least 2 that have an A and a B. You cannot have an A without a B. You can have a C, D, whatever. That's fine, but you have to have a B as long as you have an A. So the second page is going to be the outline where you map out what it is that your paper is going to be about, and then you're going to start writing the paper. Now I want to scroll through this person's paper. This is a relatively long paper. It's longer than the one that you're going to write, but I want you to look at the works cited page at the end and notice that the works cited page follows the page number sequence. The last page of the paper is going to be 8. The works cited pages are pages 9 and 10. Each one of the works cited entries are going to be in alphabetical order, A, C, C, etc. They're all double spaced, and they use hanging indent. The second line of each one is indented, and your works cited page is going to look much like this whenever you submit it. Now let's look briefly at the paper here. A research paper is not any different than any paper that you're going to write for any class that you take, and I typically always tell students to start out by actually writing the type of essay that's in question. And since this is an argument persuasion paper, it would be good for you to sit down and actually write a 5-paragraph argument persuasion paper that's around 800 words in length. And then you can go through and you can actually insert the information that you've taken from your summaries from the annotated bibliography, where you summarize the information. You can actually pull those sentences directly in and use them to support what it is that you're saying in the paper itself. You'll start out with an introduction, and the introduction kind of gives some brief background and overview of what it is that you're talking about in the paper, and then the last sentence is going to be the thesis statement. This thesis statement matches the thesis statement that is on the outline. It's the same exact one, and the thesis statement in the introduction is underlined to signify that it is indeed the thesis statement. This person went through and italicized each section of the paper at the beginning, each Roman numeral section, where you had Roman numeral 1, without putting a 1 out here to the side, Roman numeral 2, you would have Roman numeral 3, Roman numeral 4, Roman numeral 5, etc. So each one of the sections of the paper is going to be italicized at the very beginning to show that your sections are you're starting a new section. I do want you to notice here that when you're writing the body of your paper, each one of the body paragraphs that you write has to follow a specific formula. When you start a body paragraph, the first sentence in the body paragraph has to be an original sentence. It cannot be cited. It has to be your own sentence that gives the main topic or main idea of what that paragraph is about. The last sentence in the paragraph has to follow the same exact suit. It has to be your own original sentence. It cannot be cited. It cannot be something that comes from a source or have parentheses or a name in it. The first and the last sentence have to be original sentences for every body paragraph that you write. And you can see here that each one of those follows exactly those directions. The first and the last are not cited. Now, somewhere in the middle of the paragraph, you also have to include at least one sentence that is not cited. There has to be at least one sentence that is original in the middle of the paragraph, so that the beginning, middle, and end of the paragraphs are all your own original sentences, that you build your paragraph around the idea that you are actually constructing the sentences and helping make sense of what it is that you're organizing in the research paper itself. All the rest of the sentences can be cited. They can be things that you pull in and blend from those 5 sources that you did your annotated bibliography on. Each one of the body paragraphs needs to be around 8 to 10 sentences in length. Whenever you get into the 8 to 10 sentence range, you're doing pretty good. You'll notice here that this one right here was just a little bit shorter. No paragraph needs to be less than 5 sentences. So 5 is the minimum, 12 is the maximum. When you have paragraphs that start to get into 15 and 20 sentences, that's way too much. There needs to be a breaking point. And you'll notice here that it's perfectly fine to break up the Roman numeral points that you've made, because this right here is Roman numeral 1, but it took more than one paragraph in order to write Roman numeral 1. The same thing with Roman numeral 2. It took more than one paragraph in order to do that. You can see with the italics that the person used here, where it's broken apart. You use as many body paragraphs as you need in order to write the information, but be sure that each body paragraph has at least one sentence at the beginning that's original, one sentence in the middle that is original, and one sentence at the end that is original. This body paragraph would have lost points because it did not follow that format. It has an original here, an original here, but there is no original in the middle. All the rest of them come directly from outside sources. Alright, each one of the body paragraphs is going to be constructed by you and pull in outside source material from the 5 sources that you put on your annotated bibliography. All 5 sources have to be cited at least once in the paper. Every single source has to be cited at least one time in the actual final paper. The sources that are cited in the paper have to be on the Works Cited page. You can't have any source in the paper that is not on the Works Cited page. It has to match up. And you only had to have 5 sources in your paper. But the final paper needed to follow the format of the fact that it's going to have to be around 1,500 to 1,600 words in length. almost around 5 pages is what we're looking for here. Now, you see throughout the course of this paper that certain things are highlighted. What I asked everybody to do on the final paper itself is to go through and find what the first source is. This is Allenprandy and Wagner. And then I wanted them to go through and I wanted them to find one time that they used Allenprandy and Wagner and to highlight one example in the paper to show that that one time that source has been used. You'll notice it is used multiple times. It's used several times throughout the course of the paper, but I only wanted it to be highlighted once to show that it had been used. This is a checklist for both you and for me because it allows you to know I did use my sources that are listed on the Works Cited page by highlighting them in the paper, and it also allows me to be able to see that you did actually use the sources that are on the Works Cited page. Kalengart, if you go through the paper here, the person found one time that he used Kalengart and highlighted it. So it's a checklist to try to determine that you've used all 5 sources that are listed on the Works Cited page in your paper. Now, after you've gone through and you've written your paper, we know that you have an introduction, you have a body, and you have a conclusion. The conclusion is going to go through and restate your main points, just like any conclusion would, and then you're going to go through and do a reworded version of your thesis statement at the end. The thesis statement is going to need to be underlined, the reworded thesis statement. You notice it's different than the original thesis statement. You'll underline it to signify that this is your reworded thesis, and then that'll be the way that you actually end and wrap up the paper. Now, the last thing that I want to point out to you, in MLA format, one of the things that it gives you the option of doing, if you have 2 articles by the same author, as you'll see here that you have Sally Driscoll and Tracy DeLacio, this article here was written by Driscoll and DeLacio. This same article here was written by Driscoll and DeLacio. You'll see that it was not have to, the names did not have to be repeated since they were the same ones back to back. MLA says that you can use these 2 little dashes to show that this is going to be the same author as the one prior to the source entry that you have here. Notice that it was alphabetized by the C and the P at the beginning of the article because it was the same author. Now, since this person had 2 articles by the same authors within the paper, I want you to look and see the way that they signified the difference between those 2. Here you see the example Driscoll and DeLacio, and then they put a brief short version of the title in quotation marks and the page number to show that Driscoll and DeLacio counterpoint was used in the paper, and then we can go back up here and find Driscoll and DeLacio point, so that both of these examples you see have the author's name, as you always have to have, and then they have the article title, a brief version of the article title, to be able to show that there were 2 separate articles by that same author. And that's the way that you'll be able to separate it if you have 2 articles that were written by the same person, because you can't just put the names and assume that the person is going to be able to understand who the names are. You have to divide that up and show the difference between the 2.